All right, maybe we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone. My name is Emily Hewes. I am the Director of Development for CEPAD USA. It's such a pleasure to have you on here tonight. It was so much fun for me to look at the list of all the folks who were signing up. I know many of you, and I've met, been in your home, many of your homes, or I've been in Nicaragua with you, and it was just so fun to see all the folks that I know who wanted to be here tonight to hear about what's happening in Nicaragua, and then also hear about what CEPAD is doing now and what future plans are. So let me give you just a little bit of sort of what's going to be happening tonight. So the purpose of this chat, or what we're calling a supporter chat, is to give an update on sort of what's happening in the country, what's happening with the organization. We're also, as you probably saw when you registered, we asked if you had any questions. And so we took all the questions that we received, and we're going to try to answer as many of those as we can during this meeting. If you would like to, you can ask us questions. You have in your, there's a chat box. And if you click on that, the chat will open up, I think, on the right side of your screen, and you can ask us questions. If we don't get to your questions, tonight we are going to try to answer them afterwards. We can put out a written document and make sure everybody gets a copy with questions that we didn't get to. We anticipate that this will be about an hour long. If you have to leave for any reason, that's fine. We are doing this, we decided to do this as a webinar, as opposed to often when you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can see everybody who's there, and people can unmute themselves. Because we were expecting so many people, we decided it was just a little bit easier for us to manage in a webinar format. So that means basically, if you want to ask a question or say something, you can do that through the chat box. If you have an issue or you're having a problem with something, we can also try to help you work that out. So again, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. And I am going to ask the other folks who are with me to introduce themselves, starting with Damaris Albuquerque. Damaris, you have to unmute.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Damaris Albuquerque. I'm the Executive Director of CEPAD, and I'm so grateful for all of your interest in Nicaragua and CEPAD and the communities we accompany. We hope to have a nice chat this evening, and we look forward to it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Olivia Iekel. I am CEPAD's volunteer coordinator. So I was first a volunteer with CEPAD back in 2014 and moved here in 2017 long-term, and have been, so this is my 4th year in Nicaragua. And I'm looking forward. It was really exciting to see all of your names as people registered, and thank you for your interest in joining in tonight. I am going to just start us off by sharing a bit of a general update about the coronavirus situation in Nicaragua, and then Damaris will give a little more of a personal update about CEPAD. But before that, we wanted to back up and just give a really general introduction of CEPAD for anyone who's new. That CEPAD is a Christian community development organization with a foundation based on Jesus' model in life and how he lived accompanying and walking with those who were poor and oppressed. And CEPAD seeks to do the same, walking alongside rural communities through a variety of different programs that help communities learn to work together, and not through anything CEPAD does, but through their work together, learn to get out of really difficult situations and cycles of poverty. So we have a whole host of programs that I won't explain all of them tonight, but but that is our mission, is to go and work in rural places where there are not other groups supporting these communities, and walk alongside them through a 5-year process of community development. That has looked a little different this year with, of course, the coronavirus COVID-19 situation. But beyond that, this was already a unique year for CEPAD because we have been working with 40 communities in all across the country, and we're planning to graduate those communities. They were going to be wrapping up their time with CEPAD and were commissioned out to continue in their development on their own and start working with a new 40 communities. So that was a part, we're going to explain more about that a little later, but that has made this year, along with coronavirus, a little bit different. As we look at the broader context in Nicaragua, which is a question that a lot of people asked us about, just to start kind of towards the beginning, the first case in Nicaragua was confirmed on March 18th. And since then, well, Latin America's timeline has really generally been behind. You know, the virus really spread from Asia and then across into, going this way for you all, across into Europe and reaching North America. And then Latin America has been towards the latter end of the timeline of virus spread. And so we know that a lot of places in the world are still in maybe early stages, or at least definitely the middle of the coronavirus spread. And that's definitely where Nicaragua is as well. So as of yesterday, official statistics in Nicaragua said that there were about 3,900 cases and 123 deaths in Nicaragua. However, given just what we know in our own surroundings and the connections in our community in Nicaragua, and then as we look at neighboring countries who have reported case numbers 5 or even 10 times higher and death rates even 10 times higher, we know that the impact has really been much greater than what those statistics convey. And so there's some independent medical associations in Nicaragua who report more like 9,000 cases and over 2,500 deaths. And that we don't know. We know there are varying statistics, but do recognize that lack of testing and lack of access to testing has been a problem in a lot of parts of the world, or maybe everywhere. And what we have seen with this, though, is that as we look at these different sets of statistics, that overall they have corresponded in terms of there being a lot of growth through May and June, and particularly in Managua. June was the month that was very hard, and it was easy to perceive that the virus was spreading quickly and that people were ill based on assumed or not confirmed cases, but what we would expect were coronavirus cases. And so we've seen this growth that really continued in June, but then in July, we started to see a decrease, and then all statistics started to show that there has been a little bit of a decrease, which has been a really good thing after this very difficult period in June and into July. Beyond that, that's the situation more in Managua, whereas we've been hearing of more cases reaching out to smaller communities, smaller cities and municipalities around the country. And so that's where concerns elevate for the rural communities that we're working with. So the health impact has obviously been one of the greatest impacts in Nicaragua as across the world, but just like all across the world has experienced, the economic impact has been severe as well. As many of you know, Nicaragua experienced a socio-political crisis in 2018, and in many ways the economy has been working to recover ever since then and has been in a recession. And so now, as of March or April or later on in the summer, when we saw that much of the world was considered in a recession, I believe we've entered into a global recession. What we're looking at in Nicaragua is that we've been in this sort of very bad economic situation for much longer than just since this year. So it's almost like a double hit on the Nicaraguan economy when many families were already facing unemployment, food insecurity, and are just really vulnerable. So in that place where they were maybe just getting by with the pandemic that's been has been very hard. So that is a big part of our concern as well, beyond just the health aspect. Along with that, we've had some questions about this, that Nicaragua has not had a national quarantine established, or a national stay-at-home order, maybe to be more accurate, but instead has, there's been preventative education efforts and disinfecting in public spaces and public transportation. And the reality is that many people would not be able to eat if things were in complete lockdown, given the situation here. So it's a very different context, a developing nation, compared to what the response looks like compared to other places. And so that has its different aspect, both pros and cons, but what we have sensed is that many people are taking all of the precautions that they can given their situation. So temperature checks that when you're entering a lot of places, as well as mask wearing, physical distancing where possible. And so those are, people have asked, and we see that people are really taking precautions now, especially as more information has become available about the virus. So that's kind of a broader Nicaragua context. Then as we look especially to the 40 communities where CEPAD is working, like everyone in the 40 communities, we've heard reports from everywhere about the impact that the virus has had, and people have been affected in a lot of ways. I know even some of you have heard about people who have passed away during this time, like Don Rafael Valdez, who was a leader for one of our partnerships that CEPAD facilitates, and other loved ones who have passed away during this time of a variety of illnesses. And so the community, certainly there are communities facing that sort of pain. And then beyond that, the economic part that I referenced has been very significant. As of April, over 500 people, community members, had returned from working abroad in primarily Costa Rica and Panama, people who were working and making money and sending that money home to their families who lived in the villages. And so that's hundreds of families now who, because those people have lost their work or needed to return home due to the situation, do not have that income that they were relying on to buy seeds, for example, to plant each year. And so that has been just one indicator of the economic impact. Besides that, there's been just like elsewhere, I know there's been a lot of misinformation and fear and anxiety that has spread throughout the population, but we've heard a lot out from these communities about not knowing what to believe and how to respond. And so with these things in mind, CEPAD did, as in March, develop a coronavirus response that we have been working to implement through April and May. May was when we really got started, and that will continue on until at least November of this year. So I did want to share a little bit about what that response has looked like as we consider just the impact in the rural communities. I'm going to show a few pictures here for you all. So let's see if I can get those up as I talk just a little bit about what our response has looked like. Let's see. There you go. So this is just a map of the 40 communities where CEPAD has been at work over the past 5 years. And in a sense, these communities, you could say, are less vulnerable in some ways to coronavirus, to the virus itself and the illness. But at the same time, just because they're not in an urban environment, but at the same time, they are very vulnerable if the virus does reach them, because they are places with a lack of transportation, limited access to healthcare, other basic services like like water and electricity. And so those needs, lack of transportation, even to get preventative supplies, were some of the reasons that all spoke into CEPAD's response, as well as the risk of food security for families that weren't able to plant or grow the crops that they usually rely on for for food throughout the year. So CEPAD has developed a response with a number of different components. One of the big ones has been education through our radio station, as well as through our networks of pastors. These, we have had let's see, there we go. We have been working to help combat this misinformation and provide solid information about what communities can do to protect themselves, as well as distributing seeds and emergency seed packets, both to women growing gardens and to those, to many farmers that we've been working with, people that they can get these planted and know that they'll have food security, Lord willing, throughout the pandemic. This is not the seeds we've actually distributed because our seed distribution is happening next week. So this is just an example of some seeds from the past with CEPAD. Another important part of the work has been distributing health kits, which I know many of you have heard about and have donated to and supported, and we are so thankful for your support. Emily's cheering, so thankful. This is just a few pictures from one of the health kit distributions and some of our staff in the distribution, as well as providing some education to families during it. I met a woman named Migdalia during the visit the distribution that I was able to participate in and help with a bit. And she explained to me that a lot of people want to buy protective measures. They want to be able to, this is Migdalia, they want to be able to respond and take care of themselves, but they don't have the resources, or they have to travel long distances just to buy general sanitizing things to sanitize, masks, etc. So she was very, very grateful. She said, it takes a lot and it's hard to get, but now we know that we have a way to work to stay safe. So this is Migdalia and her son Kinner. And in our distributions, only one family member is allowed to come because we need to socially distance. However, Kinner was so excited that he came along with his mom. And I said, Kinner, what's in your bag? What did you get? And he pulls out the masks and he pulls out this soap and shows me. And afterwards, he ran home with his mask to give one to his sister. And his mom told me he's been wanting a mask and wanting a mask, and now he's really, really happy. So that was a fun, joyful moment amidst really difficult time that we're all facing. I am now gonna let Damaris share just a more general.
I think Olivia might be frozen, Damaris, but
Okay,
I
was waiting.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this year, 2020, has been very difficult for everybody, and in the world, and in Nicaragua at CEPAD. Since March, we have been impacted with the pandemics, and we had to let go 6 of our staff in March, those who were related to the program who received visiting groups. As the visiting groups didn't come, then we had to let them go. That impacted their families as well in our organization. Then in June, 3 of the staff members, including myself, lost loved ones. And also that impacted not only us, but in my case, impacted also the organization, as El Profe was one of the founders of CEPAD and one of the pillars. So, but those losses and those challenges, they have motivated us to continue to carry on the mission of CEPAD. And that's what we've been trying to do. With COVID-19, everything we had planned had to be stopped and replanned. We had to change the ways we do things. We had to move, our staff had to move to virtual work, and that's always presents a challenge, especially in a country like Nicaragua, when electricity and internet connections are so unreliable, and also our knowledge of technology. So we have had to learn that and to hold our meetings virtually, but also how to communicate with the communities we were working with. And we do that through our cell phones, WhatsApp, and because now technology is available in some of the communities where the signal is good and the cell phone is good. Now, also we took other measures, like if we had to have meetings, having fewer people attending it, and so have smaller groups, and taking, of course, all the hygienic precautions that everybody knows: wash your hands and wear masks, socially distancing. I like the term physically distance instead of social distancing, because really we are connected socially, and but physically we're not able to. And when we planned 2020 last year, we already knew that this year it was going to be different for CEPAD, because we were finishing the 5-year work in the 40 communities. We had to do an evaluation of impact of the work in those communities. We had to plan strategically for the next 5 years. And we also had to write our plan for 2021. What we didn't know, of course, was that it was going to be very difficult to do all these things. Thankfully, we had already done the evaluation of impact on the first months of the year. And we learned from that evaluation of impact that the model of development that we implement in the communities works. We knew that in 2018, when the political and social crisis didn't allow us to go and visit the communities because of the roadblocks and the violence. The communities continued their work. And so we knew that they were prepared to continue by themselves. And then this COVID-19 confirmed that. And we keep in touch with them, but we don't have any more training with them this year. We had planned what we call graduation ceremonies in April. So to tell them, now you go on your own, and we will go and choose new communities. We could not hold those ceremonies, but we're still hopeful that maybe later in the year, October, November, we will do so. We hope so. And we started the strategical planning. We reviewed our mission, our vision, our goals, our programmatic goals. And with that, finishing this process and start the planning for 2021. The new communities have already been chosen. So now we have 42 for the next 5 years, because it's 7 communities per region. So that's 6 regions. That's 42 communities. And also we are continue doing our emergency response. And we're grateful for this, for those of you who have given toward this, because it's a continuous need. We don't know when COVID will stop, and nobody knows. And we don't know when will you be able to come and visit again. So we have to change the way we're doing things. And also, some of you know that I had planned to retire in July 31st. That was last Friday. And, but with this pandemics, the whole process has been of selecting the new director has been very slow. And so they haven't come up with a candidates to present to the board. And so the board asked me to stay on at least for the rest of the year, So to give the timeline will stretch a little bit, but they have charged the committee to present candidates by the 3rd week of August. And then the plan is then if it is accepted, if the candidate is selected, a new director is selected, then I'll be with that person for a few months. So the transition from director to the new director, it will be smooth. So that's how things are going on CEPAD right now.
Thank you. Oh.
No, go ahead.
So the next thing that we were going to do was we were going to, we took all the questions that we had received and we sort of tried to boil them down into, many of them had many things in common. So we have 5 questions that we prepared answers to. So I'm going to read the question and then either Damaris or Olivia will be responding to those. So one of the questions was sort of what is CEPAD's primary focus at this time in terms of programs and services? Are staff still able to get out into the communities and to do the work?
I'll go ahead and answer this question. And Emily, Damaris, and I were joking a lot that we knew technologically, just in general, plus in Nicaragua, anything can happen. And I think the second I finished or before I finished, my computer completely went out. So I'm glad to be back with you. And maybe we got that out now and it's not going to happen again. But I did miss a little bit of what Damaris said though. And this question really relates to, I think, a lot of what she's already explained about what CEPAD has been really up to over these past number of months. So I hope I won't repeat her too much. But I think one of the biggest things, so it said, what's our primary focus? And our primary focus has absolutely been the coronavirus emergency response. And we are so grateful that everything we proposed in April, that we're able now to be carrying out a lot of that because of the funding that we've received from really all over, from donors as well as a lot of agencies supporting CEPAD and making it possible. So that emergency response really has been a big focus, but at the same time, we are not neglecting what we set out to do this year, apart from those things like the graduation ceremonies, which Damaris mentioned, or graduation events that we have not been able to hold, but still hope to hold later this year at some point, to have a strong exit from these communities that we've been walking with over the past 5 years. Something that, as we've done this emergency response and tried to think about exiting well from the communities, and also one thing that has been really good is that these communities were well trained and ready to implement this response and carry out parts of it with just our support, but really having the community involved with the crisis counseling, the pastoral care, that community leaders, and the coordination between community leaders. Having worked with these communities so long, having a strong relationship has made it all the more effective. So beyond that, as Damaris mentioned with our strategic planning, a lot of people, I think, wonder what happens in this year where you're moving from one community to the next. Does that mean there's less work because there aren't normal workshops? And frankly, I wondered that before I was actually here for this year. And I realized, wow, this is actually the most important and one of the most critical times of our work, because we are stepping back, looking at a big picture of what is our mission, our vision, what has gone really well, what do we need to change in our programs, are there any new programs we need to consider? And we actually just finalized our programs for the next 5 years this past week. We've been doing a lot of virtual meetings with our staff around Nicaragua and have been able to carry on that process as well during this time, so that we are still able to have a strong start in the new communities. And so that's another piece of what this year has looked like for CEPAD. We have been able to travel out to communities as necessary, but have really been limiting visits to when we've been doing these distributions and coordinating by phone as much as possible. There are some communities that we have to travel to because they don't have cell phone service. But overall, we are able to work in the communities, but we're trying to be very diligent about when we choose to travel out to them to limit those interactions to when most necessary. I did, as we think about kind of our focus and our programs and what's happening over the next 5 years, want to share about an experience from last February. So the very end of February, beginning of March, before this, it was on our radar, COVID-19, but before it really, before we were realizing in Nicaragua how much it was going to impact this year. But at that time, we had a group of visitors here and got to travel out to a community in Hewes called Barranco Alto, and got to meet with this community. It's a community that has not worked with CEPAD, but that was on the list, who had asked CEPAD, would you come work with us? Would you come work with us during these next 5 years? And that's an important part of our work, that we always want an invitation from the community before we consider working somewhere. And so we had received that, and they were, of what we knew so far, we hadn't done all of our research and surveys to really decide what communities would be selected for these 5 years, but this one seemed probable. And so we were able to go meet with the community, with leaders, with women, and just learn about their situation. And we learned, and I share this story because I think it gives us a lot of hope for the future and what we'll be able to do with these new communities, even amidst coronavirus. And so we sat down to meet with them, and we heard about some major difficulties they're facing, because the community is surrounded by rivers on 2 sides. And so they have issues with access, especially during, the water dries up sometimes during the dry season, and they have a lack of access to water. They have wells, but they are contaminated.
Poor Olivia. I think it looks like she's frozen again, but she did a great job preparing us. So I can take over where she left off. So she was talking about this community, right? And the hope that we see in the future, but also the challenges, the very real challenges that these communities face. So let's see. Oh, maybe we got her back. Okay.
I'm back.
Yeah, I was just saying I was going to take it over, but you're back.
Are you on?
Yes. We can hear you, Olivia.
Okay, I'm here. What a shame, right in the middle of the story. So just to wrap up briefly, this community, I don't know exactly where it cut off, but they had just expressed, one of the community leaders, Jose, he said, people have talked really well about CEPAD, and we have these issues. They had explained about how they would have a lack of water, but then there would be flooding and nobody could leave the community during these times when the river was really high, and how they need a bridge and a variety of different issues. The women had explained how we're really just at home, we take care of our kids, we cook, and we think we can do more, we don't know what we can do to help our community. And so Jose said, people have talked well about CEPAD. We've heard about people who they are finding the solutions to their problems, and those solutions have been become a reality for them. They had problems that really affected them, and that's what we want to become strong like that in order to solve our own problems. But right now we can't. We don't know how. And that's the sort of situation where CEPAD says, we know you are capable of figuring out, working together to solve these issues that your community is facing, and we want to provide training and come alongside you. And so women saying, we want to do more, we don't know what, and those sort of stories are what excite us about thinking about our staff getting out there, walking alongside them, and helping over time to see real change happen in communities like Barranco Alto. So that's a bit about our programs and focus. And yeah, if there's more questions about that, we'll be glad to talk more about it later or over writing.
Another question that was sent in was, the question was, are you anticipating changes to future programs or mission to adjust to the current challenges and limitations?
I'll answer that. We are not anticipating major changes in the programs. We are just making adjustments taking lessons from the evaluation of impact, but also taking into account the context, the coronavirus. So we still have the programs in our communities, we still have the models. We have there the development model, the educational model, the pastoral model, the partnership model that we're working on. So I know that many of you are partners, have been in the partnership program for many years and are maybe concerned about that. We will continue the partnership. It's just that we are doing small adjustments and maybe redefinition of some minor things, but we continue to focus on working with the communities and consolidating the relationships and in the partnerships. Also our other national programs as the radio and the refugee program that continue. And as I said, maybe some goals have been readjusted, will be readjusted during this strategical planning. But in general, we don't anticipate major changes. Of course, we have to adjust to the way we do things. We're learning with this COVID, as I said, changing on a way of doing things. Before, we did these workshops with the communities, and the 7 communities in a region, the participants of the 7 communities met together in one place, and then they did a workshop, and we cannot do that anymore. So we have to go, our staff will have to go to each community to meet with a small group and taking physical distance. And also we'll take advantage of some of the people who have been trained from the communities who have already graduated and that they are nearby, so they can give this more close work with the new ones. So we want to encourage them, and they have been gracious enough to say, we want to share with others what you have taught us, what we have learned. And so we're taking advantage of that. So, and also our staff will work more in education and technology and in all these programs and all these applications. And also if some of our community leaders have access to technology, will also take advantage of that. So the way we do things might change a little, but the focus, the content of the programs will still be the same.
Thank you, Damaris. As many of you may know, CEPAD also embarked on a capital campaign some years ago to consolidate the organization into one location, and then also build offices to house the organization. Those of you who have visited, have probably seen the offices that are existing are quite small, and were intended to be temporary. And so there were some questions about the status of that campaign and what's been happening. So Damaris is also going to answer that question.
Well, it seems such a long time, but in February, it was just in February, we had our groundbreaking ceremony to put our first brick there. And all of a sudden, well, all this came to a halt, but we haven't stopped pursuing the permits to build. So we still, things usually, in general, in Nicaragua are slow to get a permit. And now with the COVID-19, slower still. So, but still we are updating our studies, our geological studies, because those already expired. It was, time flies rapidly, but it was like 6 years ago that we did our first geological study, and it only has 5 years, but it's valid only for 5 years. So we had to do that again. We're doing that again already. and we are pursuing the rest of the permits, checking and rechecking the limits of our property. Those who have visited us know about our noisy neighbors that we have, and we're trying also we want to at least build a wall in the very near future, so to keep distance, physical distance from our neighbors. So our goal for this year would be to have all the studies and permits ready, and also our budget for the whole project. So we can focus then on what phase we're going to build next, and then we can raise more funds for those stages that are going to be built. But we haven't stopped, we haven't lost hope. We still our dream, and we're working on it.
There was also a question, or a few questions, about whether CEPAD would be involved in distributing a vaccine against COVID when that becomes available.
I thought this was a really interesting question, and maybe speaks to the fact that people perceive the strong network that CEPAD has out in communities. And I think that the best answer would just be that not directly. We, of course, won't be administering the vaccines. We don't have health professionals. But a really important part when we think about the COVID-19 vaccine in Nicaragua, or really any vaccine, is that Nicaragua has a strong public health system. The current government has invested a lot over the years in the public health system, and it's a community-based health model overall. And so CEPAD will not be actively involved in that, but does help, just like we work with other government agencies located in the municipalities near the communities. We will help to try to be that liaison and connection to help the MINSA, the health ministry, staff and authorities get out and get connected. I think our community leaders will be very supportive in that process when a vaccine would hopefully be available. We have had some examples. Earlier this year, there was actually a vaccine campaign for another vaccine, so not for COVID-19, of course, yet. But there had been a lot of misinformation, and some communities were fearful, had heard that, like, this is bad, don't let them come, don't let them vaccinate your people, something of that sort. And our staff was able to help talk with them and talk with community leaders and say, no, like, provide some reassurance and also educational information to strengthen the relationship between the local health authorities and the community. So in that sense, I think we'll be involved, and the community leaders will be involved.
Thanks, Olivia. And then the last question that we got, and a number of people asked this question, was about what does CEPAD need most from supporters, and how can people be supportive or helpful during this time? So I actually want to start by just saying thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, again, like, I saw the list of people who were going to be on this call, and Olivia and Damaris and I were sort of chatting about it, and I was like, oh, that's so many great people, and it's so many people who are just so supportive of CEPAD, and are really, you all are the folks that make all of this work possible. I know many of you donated to support the campaign, to get out the masks and the health kits and the seeds to families. So thank you. And many of you have been giving for many, many years. So all of, everything that we're talking about essentially is really made possible by you. And we can just never say thank you enough for what you've done, and what a difference you've made in the lives of so many people in Nicaragua. I think it's still a great question, what does CEPAD need at this point? And I just wanted to talk about two things. This year, as you've probably heard from many other organizations, has been a challenging year financially. I think CEPAD traditionally has raised a lot of funds in Nicaragua through the delegation program, through other programs in country that don't actually have anything to do with people from the US visiting. There are other programs that CEPAD develops, like a school in Leon, and then a few other programs especially through the guest house that they own, where people both from Nicaragua and from the United States come, and that really is a source of income that helps support CEPAD's programs. Unfortunately, this year, no one is traveling, not internally in Nicaragua, not from, from the exterior. And then there's also things like the school have had real challenges just with students, families not being able to pay, students not going for fear of getting sick. So those programs that generally, raise funds and that those funds make, are a significant portion of CEPAD's budget, they have not, they've not been able to bring in the funds that were anticipated. So that is certainly a challenge. However, on the flip side, this is also a really exciting time. Looking forward to the next 5 years with new communities. I know for CEPAD staff, it's an exciting time, it's a challenging time where they're building those new relationships, starting to walk with those new communities. These are communities that in the beginning, face a lot of challenges. As Olivia was talking about, challenges of not having potable water, of not having enough food to feed themselves. And so there's both a lot of hope, a lot of excitement about what can be done, and a lot of work still to be done. So it's a real opportunity, and we're grateful for all of you who have given up until this point, and we continue to need support to be able to walk with those communities. I would encourage you, if you have things that programs that are especially dear to you, or things that you feel really passionate about, and you'd like to know more about those, I would really encourage you to reach out to any of the three of us, even if it's just for information. We'd love to provide that to you. So any gift that you're able to give is always appreciated. So this is both a thanks for what you have done, and a thanks for what the people and the programs that you will sustain into the future.
Thanks, Emily. I'll follow up with that, just adding another piece, but first by reiterating that the fact that so many people wrote in and said, how can we help CEPAD right now, was just very, very touching. And I think just meant a lot to hear, oh, there's all these people that really care and are thinking about, are praying about for CEPAD and for all of us, for Nicaragua in this time. So beyond what Emily shared, I think another place where, how can you help us, is just by continuing to stay in touch. And during this time where delegations and visits aren't feasible in the same way, we're having conversations right now, really exploring what will it look like when the borders are reopened. Right now there aren't commercial flights, and there haven't been since early April. So it's not that delegations could even happen if anyone wanted to, but we know there will be a point when they will open up again, and have those conversations about what does it look like to be really prepared, and how do we need to adjust, and we really do hope to welcome people back, but recognize that there's a lot we don't know about how to do that most responsibly yet. And so as we explore that, we definitely welcome your input to know, for those of you coming from churches and who maybe have visited or were considering visiting in the future, to hear from you about where you're at, what you're thinking about the future, what would be helpful to you as your congregation or your mission team asks those questions also. We want to have that dialogue and figure out, I think, a way forward together. But in the meantime, we just want to try to figure out ways to really stay connected. So I was just talking with Anita today, who is the director of our Partnership and Delegation Office, and she and John and Ian are working to keep facilitating those existing partnerships. And so to figure out what that means for those of you with a partnership or walking alongside CEPAD in relationship, I just encourage you to try to keep that up. Whatever that looks like, we invite your feedback, but really your participation too. I know that a lot of people are it's even been overwhelming when you're trying to stay in touch with so many people but can only do it virtually. And so just know that really helps us. We love and are encouraged by those connections. And I know that goes for all the CEPAD staff. So that's another piece that, as we look forward to having visits, but before visits, continuing in relationship is another thing that really does help and matter.
Thank you, Olivia. And also a very important piece for us is that we continue praying, that you pray for us, pray for our staff to give us health, to be healthy and to be motivated, to be safe. Also pray for our finances, that we can meet all our obligations of this year, especially regarding the staff salaries and all those utilities, those high electricity bills. And also pray while we search for the new leader to come on board. So it's very important for us to feel that we are supported by so many and we are lifted up in prayers. And we also pray for you. We have that prayer partner program that I think that it's going very well. And please continue. Those who are in partnership, praying for each other, please continue to do so. And invite you, if more are interested, contact us on how to get involved in that program as well. So that's what we need from you most.
Thank you. We did also want to mention that Damaris, Olivia, myself, and others within the CEPAD family, like I know many of you know John and Ian, who are PC USA missionaries that are with CEPAD, and others. We are available to do calls like this with either your churches or your groups, or if you would like us to to find a time to do a Zoom call with you, we would any or all of us would be happy to do that. So please reach out to us if that's something that you would be interested in. Just to wrap up, again, thank you for being here tonight. This was something that we were really looking forward to. And I know someone had asked if we could show the videos, and it's so fun to be able to see everybody. Maybe next time we can do that. This time, because it was our first one, we were a little nervous. And so we decided to do it webinar because it was easier for us to control. But maybe next time we can do it where we can all see each other. So
I'll interrupt and say that what I am finding is that I can one by one invite you to turn your cameras on. So Bill, if you would like to stick around or others want to stick around, I could stay on, we could pull people up, but I don't think we'll have to have another call, maybe with a certain topic, and everyone, we could set it up that way instead.
And we have, if you're not on our mailing list, but you would like to be, there's an email sign up on our website, or you can send me an email and I can get you signed up. And yeah, thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your support. And we're just so grateful.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, and thank you again.